hold on a second. So why are you against numerical ratings?
Yeah, this is a debate that we had on our podcast many times.
Yeah, we tried to drop numerical ratings, and our audience did not let us.
Yeah.
I think audiences like them, and I think that they can be valuable. Like, I think there's something to be said for just, if you want a recommendation on something, you can go to Metacritic, and it'll tell you Zelda Breath of the Wild is a good video game, Whiplash is a good movie, or whatever. Like, you'll see a high rating, and it'll tell you that generally speaking, people like this thing, which can be very useful in our current age of like content overwhelm. There's so much stuff. You just want to know what's good. You want a wire cutter for art, fine, you can go get that. And so like I get why people value it, especially why audiences value it. As a critic, at least as a game critic, it was like I just never could come up with a number to put on something. It was the worst part of anytime I've done a scored review, which is pretty infrequently, it's always the worst part. Like, of you write this long thing about all the like nuances of your take and like what you think of this thing and how it compares to all this other art and what you got out of it and your experience. And then at the end, you're just like, and now I have to just be like, well, it's better than this, but worse than that. I think it's bad for discourse. Like, I think that in video games, at least, there's so much discussion around like, well, he gave this an 8 and he gave that game a 7, so he's saying this game is better than that game. And it's like, I don't know, like one was a football simulator and the other one is like a Tetris clone. Like, it's like they're so different that
But they're both 8s. They're exactly the same quality of game.
So it has like, there's a rhetorical problem with it because it like levels everything out, where especially in video games, this is an issue because one video game can be like a super gameplay light narrative experience. The other can be like a really deep simulation. The games can be so many different things that trying to have a standardized review score just makes no sense. And,
I'm not even sure that we brought them back because the audience made us bring it back. I mean, for me, it was because I wanted to keep arguing with David about
it's a
his
fun
rating.
thing
That's
to
what the
argue
audience
about.
wanted to hear
Yes.
too. Everybody
Yes.
wanted to hear the arguments.
Yeah.
I get
for-
that. Like, it's a fun thing to argue about because it gives you this like place to hang your hat at the beginning of the argument.
Right.
Well, I gave it a 5 and you gave it a 10. So like, let's argue about those 5 points and what that means. I don't know. I've never been a huge fan, but it's also sort of fun to give this movie a rating.
Yeah.
Especially that I gave it the
important.
lowest rating. That makes me.
Oh man,
That makes
I think
me
it's
happy.
important to not take them too seriously too, because
Yes.
as we've seen, I change my ratings constantly, and I think based on what you just said, I might lower my rating. I don't know.
We'll see
my
at the
God.
end.
But we'll see.
I think you should be allowed to do that. And that's actually another
Yeah.
thing. We could talk about this forever, but like in video games, there's a whole thing where like game studio bonuses are based on Metacritic. Like a part of the industry is built around review scores. And that to me is not
Right.
good and part of a sort of toxic, bad part of the games industry. So I
There's like
also
a
don't
moral
like that. And I
responsibility.
don't like being a part of that system. So I always appreciated that.
Oh, that's
that we
bizarre.
didn't
Although I
have
guess
numbers.
it's a little better than game sales.
I mean, but sales at least reflect like the money that like you're making off the game and thus the number of people you can employ and like how much money goes back then to the people who made it if in bonuses. Like that, at least there's sort of a through line there. When it's just
Right.
critics, especially when like Metacritic has like a lot of review sites I've never heard of, or it's just sort of questionable how they even do it, or they assign a rating to people who didn't give a score. Like that just feels so much more subjective that it's, I don't know, it's always rubbed me the wrong way.
Have you ever acutely felt that you contributed to that machine where like you gave something a really glowing or really bad review and it really affected the people?
I mean, not in the Metacritic way, only because most of my reviews weren't scored. But yeah, I mean, when I've written really glowingly about a game or talked about a piece of music, on Strong Songs, like people, you'll hear from the people who made it sometimes, and they'll be really happy that someone liked it, and that's nice. I don't think you hear as often from the people who aren't happy that you said something critical, though I've certainly, sometimes gotten the sense that people weren't happy that I said something critical. So I guess it goes both ways.
I felt this one time.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote
sure.
the review. I wrote the script for the Linus Tech Tips review of Jibo, which was like an animatronic, like digital assistant kind of robot. And then we excoriated it. And then within a year, they went out of business.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh my God. Like,
But you
Whoopsies.
just explained to people that the product wasn't good, and they probably went out of business because the product wasn't good, not because you
Yeah.
told people it wasn't good, right?
well, but it's everything. It's like capitalism is a distributed kind
Sure.
of thing we all participate in. And I just played my role. But that was just how it shook out. Like I played my part.
It's a hard
it just
balance.
was really weird because, I talked to the people who were affected by that.